Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another film review. And you're most probably confused. You're most probably thinking, "Hold up, Lewis, you did a Crow review the other day." Yes, I did, but at the time, I hadn't fully watched the original 1994 copy. So this is more of a 1994 edition of that film review. So without further ado, let's not beat around the bush. The 1994 edition starts very different to the modern version in the sense that it starts off by telling us that there has been a murder. It also starts off with a beautiful narration which tells us about the fact that the crow can also be a representation of death and how it is supposed to guide people to the afterlife. And so, as the narration plays out, we hear our narrator telling us the fact that two lovers can never truly be separated. As the story continues, we begin to learn the life of Eric Draver. Eric Draver, a misunderstood character who gets taken advantage of and murdered on the night before his wedding, near Halloween. Eric Draver goes flying out of the window and smacking onto the pavement, dying, whilst his wife-to-be is assaulted and then murdered in their flat. They try to do everything, the police and the medics, to save her life, but sadly they can't do anything. Now, it's uncertain to me when exactly in this film he comes back, but by the looks of it, it seems like he comes back a year later, digging his way out of the grave and trying to resurrect his lost love. After coming out of the grave, he finds himself walking through the street, confused at exactly why he's come back from the dead. But as he goes back to the apartment in which him and his beloved both spent most of their years, he begins to have flashbacks of the events that played out that night. He also can't get over the fact that he is the only one to come back. He looks into the mirror and assumes himself the Crow identity, painting his face white and black. He stalks the night and starts looking for the people who wronged him, taking them out one by one. Alongside the tragedy of his own death, he tries to help out a little girl, Sarah, and her mum. He finds her mum up in the flat with one of the people who wronged him. He injects the guy with the poison that he has been poisoning this little girl's mum with, squeezing the poison out of her vein/drugs, saves the mother's life, telling her to go back to her daughter and live her life, not keep living in the same dust hole that she's been living the last couple of years. Eric also takes out someone called Tintin in the beginning of this. Tintin was one of the assaulters who used a knife and was very malicious. After taking out Tintin and a few of the others, Eric isn't playing around anymore and is looking for the big boss. Eric blows up a shop belonging to a certain gunsmith and essentially is trying to fear him into telling the big boss that Eric is on his way. After destroying the shop, Eric comes into contact with one of the police who has been hearing all about the murders. He tries to hint to the police officer at the time that he is the dead man, in fact, who was buried a year ago in the graveyard. The police officer, of course, being very skeptical, doesn't believe him at first, but then when he gets back to his case files and puts it all together, it makes sense. The only person who links everything in this case is him as a vigilante. Eric gets closer and closer to the people who wronged him and is on his mission towards getting the big boss. He only has a couple more people to take out, and then he'll be ready for the main event. After taking out one of the main abusers by setting his car alight and chucking it into the river, Eric leaves a sign behind, a giant crow in flames. It's also revealed to us halfway through this film that Eric was in a band, and it turns out he's the only last member of his band, which makes you start to wonder whether or not the people who Eric is hunting down also took out most of his mates. Eric finally hunts down the people who he's been looking for. He takes most of them out after tricking them into believing that he is, in fact, just a mortal hippie who's turned up searching for a fight. After falling on the floor and then jumping back up, he takes most of them out and then runs to the fire escape. After that massacre, he finds himself in a sticky situation as there's only the boss and his inner circle left to hunt down. On his way back to hunting them down, Eric remembers the fact that he took the ring that he found in the jeweler's shop / gun merchants. He hands this ring to the little girl Sarah as a little momentum so that she won't forget him or his wife. Before this, of course, whilst he was on the run, he goes past a bunch of trick-or-treaters, which starts to remind him the fact that it's Halloween, one of his most favourite times of the year. Eric and the cop and Sarah get caught up in a crossfire as the big bad boss lures them into a church. Once in the church and having the showdown, the cop and Eric do everything they can to take down the boss and eventually manage to overpower him. But Eric walks out to the graveyard, hurt and shot, and finds himself in mortal danger of dying. He's finally immortal once again, and he knows his time is slowly coming. He goes back to the graveyard, and the cop misleads one of the head detectives by pretty much telling him that he is on the roof. Whilst out in the graveyard, and Eric takes his final breath, he looks up to see his love of his life, and the pair of them walk off, finally at peace once and for all. So what did I think of the 1994 version? Well, I like it. One thing I really wish now that I've watched the original they'd kept in the modern version is I wish they'd kept the scene with the drugs being taken out of the mum's system. I thought that was a very kind act. It's something that the director and the writer did not have to do with the story, but I can see where they're coming from. They're pretty much saying that just because people live in somewhere that isn't exactly pleasant to live in, they shouldn't have to degrade themselves and put themselves through stuff. The narration was also beautiful in this. I absolutely love how it had that really gothic feel to it. However, the only thing, as I've previously mentioned in the other review before this one, I wasn't too much of a fan of the way that he's supposed to be a supernatural being, but yeah, I get it. It's a gothic thing. He's putting on his makeup, but I can get where the modern version was really trying to core down on this supernatural idea of when you come back from the dead, you literally don't come back the same as you were. And that's mainly because if you've watched things like Dracula or zombie movies, they all look dead when they come back. Eric looked like himself in the original, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because he is still himself, but he is this other identity as well. But in turn, this idea of him coming back with supernatural powers feels more grounded when he is definitely completely covered in this supernatural power. And that is the reason why I will have to give the original Crow an 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next film review. Until then, goodbye. Stay beautiful. You gorgeous people.